Hi, everybody. This is Jason Bloomberg with Intellyx, and welcome to our video about Tectonic Financial and their experiences with Zoho Creator. So I have two professionals joining me today. We have David Clifford, the Chief Strategy Officer of Tectonic Financial, and we have Matt Gallagly, the CEO and lead consultant at Trailguide Digital. And these two gentlemen work closely together on a lot of different projects at Tectonic and its T-Bank division. And it'd be great to sort of hear from these fellows, what their experiences are overall. But let's start, Dave, with you. Can you give us a quick overview about Tectonic and T-Bank in particular?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so Tectonic Financial Inc. is a financial holding company, and we're NASDAQ traded. TP is the symbol. And we have a series of financial services businesses that are across the array of financial services industries. So we have a bank at the core. We have a couple of investment management firms. We have an insurance agency. And then we also have a factoring business that's in the trucking industry. But I would say all of our businesses tend to skew on the smaller side of things.
So Matt, why don't you give us a brief introduction to your company as well and what you're doing with Tectonic?
Sure. Yeah. So Trailguide is authorized Zoho partners. We've been working with Zoho, specifically for a number of years, building custom applications and working with clients like Tectonic and T-Bank to help them get the most out of the Zoho suite. And that's what we do day in and day out for T-Bank amongst other clients.
Well, very good. So I'd like to discuss Tectonic's journey with low code broadly, and then we'll zero in on some specifics. But Dave, where did it start? And can you give us an example of an early project you did, maybe with Matt's help with low code?
Sure. Yeah. So I joined Tectonic in 2018, and pretty shortly thereafter, I started looking at the various technology platforms that were out there where we could do some custom things with portals and workflow tools. And it became evident to me that the trend in the industry, particularly for a business like ours that wasn't a massive business like a JP Morgan or a Bank of America, the trend was clearly towards low code. So we started to look at the various platforms that were out there, looking at the charts of the competitors and the challengers and those things that the analysts put out there. And we narrowed our search down to Zoho Creator and a couple of other platforms. And we ultimately chose Zoho Creator as our platform of choice. That was in 2019. And so we started to play around with the platform ourselves. And we built a couple of applications for our retirement business. And while we did see there was a lot of power and a lot of things that we could accomplish with the low code platform, I learned pretty quickly that we could get a lot more out of the Zoho Creator platform if we worked with an expert. And so in the middle of 2019, we came across Trailguide, and I can't say enough positive things about Matt. It always pains me to do so because I know he's gonna spend his time with other clients, but Matt's incredible. And so, we started working with Matt in the middle of 2019. And I think the first application that we built was for our bank trust department. They have a retirement platform. And so we built an onboarding solution for that business that had some workflow and client-facing components to it.
So Matt, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's accurate, and I appreciate the compliments as always. But yeah, no, I think that was a good representation of kind of how we got things going. And that was that first portal we built out is still in use today. And I think in fact we met yesterday and talked about some features to add to it. So as most of these things tend to be, it's you have the initial idea, and sometimes there's a version 2, and often there's features and things that get added over time. So it's been beneficial not only to be able to put an application out there in the low code space, but be able to easily adjust it as needed, right? Because the world changes and the business changes and people at the business change and process. There's been how many hundreds of little adjustments over time that are almost unnoticeable because they're so easy to make, right? So just for what it's worth, I think that's an interesting angle on that initial portal we built out, right?
100% agree with that. And I think this is to your earlier question, Jason. One of, our business is very broad and we're pretty small. So the team that manages this business. And so we love having a platform that can evolve as we go along. And that's the nice thing about low code. We can take a very agile approach to development. We can, release software updates pretty much constantly with the low code platform, and we can make changes very easily. And we love that about it. That's been one of the biggest advantages of the Creator platform.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too, right? You can build real things that are very robust and capable, but they don't become this monolith that can't be modified easily as well. So yeah, it's
exactly
nice. Yeah, and
So
selfishly from my perspective, yeah, it's great to work with that. You're not stuck in it, stuck with this thing that you have to live with. So yeah, it's great.
So the application that you folks worked on that I'm most familiar with is the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP application that TBank put together. And the reason I'm familiar with it is I wrote up a case study for you folks, and it'll be on the Zoho website shortly if it isn't already. So you can get more in-depth information on that. But now that I have you two gentlemen on the video, if you could sort of give us an idea of what was the initial motivation for this PPP application, and tell us a bit about sort of how it played out. How did you put it together, and how did it work, and sort of give the audience an idea of sort of what the story was with that.
Sure. So if we go back to when we first started working with low code, that was in the middle of 2019, and over the fall of that year, so October, November, December of 2019, Matt and I had a couple of applications together. Well, fast forward to March of 2020, and the world ends, and I was on spring break actually at the time, and I got a call from our CEO, and he said, "Hey, look, he's a lawyer by background, so he's very focused on legislation, and he was up to speed on everything that was going on. And he said, look, there's going to be a very big push by the government to get money into the hands of these small businesses that really need it in order for their survival. And we want to make sure that we can get the money to our borrowers, because there's going to be a limited amount of money out there, right? There was a certain amount of money that would get approved, and we needed to be able to put or process these applications as quickly as possible so that our borrowers would be protected during that period of time. So we started, he said, look, we need a portal. It's going to have a back-end workflow processing component to it, and then some way to get that data to the SBA. And oh yeah, you're going to have 2 weeks to do it, right? So we started on March 25th, Matt and I. So the development team was me and Matt. And then we had heavy involvement from the SBA team at the bank, the Small Business Administration team, on the testing and feedback and telling us what kind of features they needed. But yeah, we started on March 25th, and we accepted the first application on April 4th. So it was an absolutely amazing example of what low code can do. Two people, 24 hours a day for 9 days, a lot of caffeine, and boom, we had this portal out there. And the feedback that we got from both the SBA team, who was having to go through this process because it was a massive workload on them, right? We ultimately processed 1,600 loans over the two spans of PPP, or the two cycles of PPP. But it was a massive workload on them, and they were really grateful that the tool was so efficient, helped them process these applications so efficiently. So great example of the power of low code, and really a perfect use case for low code.
Yeah, and I think in that 10 days of development, you had 2 days you were in the car getting back from spring break, so that even slowed us down a bit more. But no, yeah, it was remarkable to pull it together, and there was certainly a little bit of a right place at the right time type of thing. And there was all the staff at the bank was very helpful, like Dave mentioned, on the testing and feedback. And so yeah, the objective was very clear, and it was largely up to us to come up with the process to achieve the objective, right? So yeah, I think there were a lot of factors that went into it, but sure, having the right tool that could get anywhere close to meeting the timeline and the capabilities of what we were trying to achieve certainly helped. But yeah,
that's right.
So,
and go ahead. Sorry, Jason.
Well, one of the things I find fascinating about this PPP example is, you say, okay, we had 2 weeks to put up a portal, and it's like, well, big deal. Anybody can put up a portal in 2 weeks. But there was a lot more to this application than meets the eye, because first of all, it was a commercial lending application, right? Banks usually take years to roll out new commercial lending applications, right? So this whole time frame was just unheard of. And then there were multiple parts of it. You mentioned the back-end workflow, and part of that was for the people processing loans, but there was also the underwriters, the ones that had approved them. And then there was the piece that communicated information to the SBA. And then there was additional work to collect additional information from the customers applying, right, if they didn't submit everything up front. So there was back and forth with the customers. And then this was just for the loans, the approvals themselves. And there was also the forbearance afterward as well, which was another component too. So if you just sort of flesh out a bit the sort of the level of complexity of what you managed to accomplish, because it really is astounding when you start getting into the details.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, and to your point, I think the one piece of feedback we got from a customer early in the process bears that out, what you just said, where they had a friend that had applied at 3 different large banks, and none of those banks even looked at their application by the time that we had processed their loan already. And so it was, the complexity of the application was pretty significant, given that we had a portal where we would check the eligibility of a borrower through a series of forms. They would upload all of the documentation that was required. We would archive that information. We would review the information that came through, be able to validate it or reject it with a message back to the borrower. Every step of the workflow, from underwriting to closing to funding of the loan, was processed through the portal. The document generation, so we generated all the loan closing documents through the portal. We had an API integration with a form called WebMerge that helped do that. We did 11,000 Zoho signs. So that's another one of the things that we love about Creator is we use the Zoho One version of it. So we have these integrations with the other suite, the other applications in the Zoho One suite. So yeah, you name it, whatever's part of underwriting a loan, it was included in this portfolio or this platform.
Yeah, and yeah, it was all part of the automation, which, the volume of applications that you were able to process was, 1,000 times normal, to say the least, right? And the back end process, what I found was that it was a full underwriting process. Even though it was this short time frame loan, it didn't mean there were shortcuts on the work in the background that the bank had to do to make sure that the right people were getting the money. And so, I think it was convenient and secure, if that's the right word, in terms of, compliance for the bank and ensuring there was no fraud and all that at the same time. So usually, security and convenience are opposed to one another, but in this case, I think it was both in a lot of ways, which was fun to watch. And then Dave, you didn't get to the part about the forgiveness process, right? But that was, again, kind of the low code gave us the ability to get the front end, right? Get the money to the borrowers that needed it to keep people employed. But then, there was the whole process, which was literally coming out and changing as we were building it in terms of the rules of the forgiveness process, and over 150K or under 150K, and there ended up being 4 different versions of the forgiveness application, and we programmed all that in, which was, it's kind of,
I had blocked all of that out, man.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's PTSD that but yeah, once you start cataloging all the the individual pieces that we worked through just day to day, it was over the course of 9 months eventually before we got all the forgiveness, so it was just, lots of tiny little things that just, the nickels and dimes added up to some pretty big stuff. But yeah, the forgiveness process, from a coding perspective was very interesting and challenging, right? It's good to have challenges and bad to have challenges. And I think when you solve those problems, it feels good. So that was certainly a challenge to get all that, complexity programmed in the system. And I think everybody got through, right? Everyone got forgiven. So.
We did. We got everybody through. And I think one of the aspects of low code that maybe gets missed is that low code is a misnomer, right? Matt literally codes all day or manages people that code. So, it is low code in that you can get an application up and running with very little code, right? But then you can take that application and you can turbocharge it with as much code as you want to. And that's what happened with the PPP portal, where, in the beginning, not all of the submissions were through API to the SBA. But then eventually all of that stuff got coded in. There was a lot of functionality added to the forgiveness process over time. So, Matt was constantly adding to the code in the application, but from day one, we had a functional application. So, it's low code to get started, and then you can add code to it as you want to enhance it, as you want to increase the amount of automation. I love that about the low code, because you get something out there. I think that's one of the tenets of good software development. Just put something out there that works and solves a problem, and then enhance it over time.
Yeah, the fact that go ahead. Sorry.
But I was going to say, I think on kind of the low code, sometimes there is a lot of code. I've heard Creator and Zoho One in general described as kind of a toolbox, right? And you can build whatever you want out of it. And I was thinking about that analogy. And I do think that's good, but I think with something like Creator, in addition to the toolbox, you have a lot of the material, right? If you're thinking about construction, you got a pile of lumber standing there. In fact, you've already got walls built. You just got to stand them up, right? So it gives you, the word platform, I think of a lot too. It's a platform to build on. You've already got a foundation. You've already got
That's right, Matt. Like
stuff.
With the creator, the customer portal piece, I was thinking about that the other day, that out of the box, you have the ability Zoho gives you authentication, permissioning, custom domains. So to use Matt's analogy, you've got basically the frame of the house already there, and you just got to start putting up the drywall.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned APIs, and you pointed out that you built the API support down the road a ways, and that wasn't because you didn't think of it or it was too hard for you. It was because the SBA didn't support it at the beginning, right? The SBA, this is this sort of stodgy old government agency. And at the beginning of this project, in spite of the fact that Congress ordered the PPP process, they had this archaic XML file upload process that was basically obsolete. So you weren't even doing it that way. And eventually they added the APIs, and now you could support that, which is the modern way of uploading information. But it wasn't that there was some limitation on your side for not doing that right off the bat. It was the SBA's limitation. And this is part of the story, right? You mentioned that the forbearance logic would continue to change. And the original application process, I remember, changed at least 3 times during those first 2 weeks, right? Where, just because Congress makes a law doesn't mean that everybody knows what to do. So there had to be the SBA had to come and say, well, this is how you should do it. This is how you should do it. And they kept, they had very little time to make those decisions as well. So this is a very odd business situation where not only do the customer's requirements evolve, but the fundamental landscape, right, the underlying regulatory framework that supports what you're trying to do is like filling in as you go. And that is just such a difficult situation. It's hard to even imagine approaching that from a traditional coding perspective. I mean, how would you even do this some other way, right?
I agree, and Matt can comment on this, but I think we, as a small community bank, we weren't even given access to the same development, the environments that the bigger banks were given access to, because those automated submissions were kind of reserved for the big banks at that point. So we ended up using robotic process automation in the first phase to submit loan applications, which we were able to connect up to Creator to do that.
It was a very enlightening civics lesson for an IT guy to see how the government delivers services, which, ultimately it was a good program. I think it helped a lot of people, but to see the iterations of how the law gets put into action was interesting. And then I couldn't agree more that to keep up with those iterations on the implementation of the policy was, it would have been hard to do otherwise, right? With the traditional development.
Yeah, so let's move on to some other examples. What else is T-Bank or the Tectonic organization generally doing with the Zoho Creator? Can you go take us through another example or two?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the businesses that we most recently added to our portfolio is Integra Funding. It's a transportation factoring business. So if I'm a truck driver, we would purchase your receivables and give you a discounted rate on that. So we built an onboarding portal for that business where if truckers on the road and they want to get signed up, they use our Creator application to submit the documents and sign contracts so that they can get onboarded. It also has a back-end workflow piece where we process those documents as they come in. I would say in most cases, in our business, kind of the way I think about it, each of our financial services businesses has a core platform. So in the bank, it's a bank core, and you're never going to replace, as a small bank, what FIS has built to process bank transactions, right? So what we do is we use the low code in all of our businesses to layer on a client onboarding, client service piece, kind of a portal to interact with clients, and then a workflow tool on the backside of. And so that we've done that in our Integra business. We've done that in the retirement planning business. We're working on, actually, for Matt's deep in the weeds on this with his team, on a loan origination portal that we have. They built us a loan monitoring system. So whenever we need updated information from a borrower, we use a Zoho Creator solution for that. So Zoho touches every business that we have now, Zoho Creator.
Yep. Yeah. Among other things, and Zoho Sign is still very actively used. Zoho Desk is even incorporated in there for some of the customer support things. So Creator, is definitely the core of the Zoho world that you take most advantage of. But yes, in CRM, we're working on that as well. So using all those different options where it makes sense. But yeah, it's generally customer facing portal and customer service type activities. So yeah.
Yeah, so you both mentioned Zoho Sign. That's Zoho's DocuSign alternative. And anytime a signature is needed, especially in an online context, it's great to have that kind of application. And then Zoho Desk, you mentioned, is Zoho's help desk application. So, and it's part of the Zoho One Suite. There's over 40 applications now. So you mentioned onboarding, and David, you talked about this factoring business, and you talked about retirement. So you have these different onboarding. So there's commonality, right? It's all onboarding, but then customer needs are different and the business needs are different. So how did you handle sort of doing onboarding a bunch of different times, but with some differences? I mean, especially with a small team, did you achieve reuse? How did you handle the distributed effort? How did the developers, you two or whoever else you had working on this, what was their experience working on these?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the Integra portal we built internally. We hired a junior coder, and he was able to build that application himself. He got some help from Matt early on in the process, kind of getting pointed in the right direction. But I would say, because it's so quick to build, and Matt, you correct me if I'm wrong here, it's not like, okay, I have this module that I'm going to reuse across all of my, those modules are the native components within Zoho. And so it's quicker to build something in Zoho almost than it is to prototype, to build I used to build clickable prototypes of the stuff that I wanted, to put together. It's quicker to actually just put the portal together. I think it's almost like the institution or Matt's organization gets, every time you build something, you learn, oh, I would have done it maybe this way if I was to do it again. And so, what we built 3 years ago looks a little bit different than it does now. But yeah, I would say it's just so quick to build that you don't even really necessarily reuse components. Matt, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think there are some components we reuse, but I'd say it's more concepts we reuse, right?
Exactly.
So if we did Zoho Sign once, and every time we, it's never perfect. There's always some either improvement that you learn through feedback from the client as they use it, new features, right? There's always new features coming out, and it's like once a week we say, was that always there or is that new, right? And you go check the release notes. Oh, that's great. So it's continually improved too. So, between that, there's pretty rare instance that you just go copy a block of code exactly as is. There's also nuance to the business process, right? So even though they're all onboarding portals, when you're onboarding a retirement request versus a loan versus a truck drivers, they all need to sign a document, but the documents are often different signatories, whatever. So, all those factors combined, you get the concepts, you improve them over time. Every time you do it, it's a little bit better, but every time you do it, it's a little bit different. And you got new features as the icing on the cake. Definitely learn and build on it.
And I think it fits with my philosophy about custom software is I'd rather go to an existing team and build a piece of software around the way that they do things today than go to a team and say, hey, here's a new piece of software that you've got to learn how to do. or you learn how to use. And by the way, you're not going to need 90% of the bells and whistles in here, but they hate that, right? Typically, my experience is the business teams hate that. What we can do with Creator, and this is why each portal is a little bit different, each process is a little bit different, is we can go in and say, hey, show us your business process. Now we're going to build something that takes what you do today and turbocharges it, automates it, makes it quicker and easier. And so that, that's another really nice aspect of low code, is that we can customize around the business unit rather than force them to learn a new way to do something.
Yeah, a lot of as I think about all the various tools and things, whether it's portal or internal workflow, but especially the internal workflow, some of the things that are the simplest are the things that people like the most and that are the biggest return, right? So I think we've learned that sometimes you can over-engineer it to some point, and to your point of like, you don't need all these bells and whistles, just keep it to the core process and do the one thing that they need to do 10,000 times a day. If you make that really easy, that's where you get the main benefit, right? So it's nice to be able to really zero in on exactly what is the biggest pain point or opportunity for efficiency gain and just nail that.
Very good. Well, we have time for one more question. So what is the company's plans for Creator in the future? Sort of where do you see this going?
Well, we've committed to the platform. So it's one, I would say the biggest impact of the PPP experience internally was that the management team and the staff and the various business units got bought in. They saw the power of the portal. And so since then, we've been integrating it wherever we can. So I would say, we plan to have Zoho Creator touch every one of our businesses, and it pretty much does today. And we will continue to build on top of the stuff that we've created. And we're actually unusual in that I think a lot of people start with CRM and then they move toward, the custom stuff. We're moving towards CRM now as well, and integrating that with Creator. But our plan is to use Zoho as much as we can. There's so much there in value that you get for your licensing that we're trying to take advantage of everything that Zoho has to offer.
Yeah, and it's good for your customers too, because oftentimes people that are in retirement, you can cross sell to a loan or vice versa, and it's a seamless experience because once they're into a portal, we've got the single sign-on across all of them, so we can provision them, and they've got one login that they can interact with Tectonic, TBank, variety of different business units all through a single source essentially, which is good for the customer experience as well.
Yeah, so that's a good point to end on, is that a tool like Zoho Creator doesn't just make it easier for the people building the applications. The end result is easier for the end customer to use as well. And that's important, right? So it's a win-win all around.
That's exactly right.
Yep, absolutely.
Very good. Well, I see we're at about the 30-minute mark, so let's wrap up. Thanks again to David Clifford, Chief Strategy Officer at Tectonic Financial, and Matt Gallagly, CEO and Lead Consultant at Trailguide Digital. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. Pleasure.
And this is Jason Bloomberg with Intellyx. And be sure to check out the Zoho website for my latest case study on what the folks at Tectonic and TBank have done. And thanks a lot for tuning in.